The Tactical Tungsten Head French Jig Nymph. I'm having trouble remembering the name of this one today. It's a mouthful. It's not a Frenchie. It's different than a Frenchie. And I will oh, it's right there in front of me on the screen here. So I don't need to practice saying it. I've got it in front of me. So we'll wait till we see a bunch of people in here. Because I start promptly, but you're not always here promptly. So I see there's Ed and Mike and Dan and Justin from Nova Scotia and Bill coming in, and another 30-some people, and we'll wait till we hit like 500 people before we start. Ha ha ha. No, we won't wait till we get to 500 because we'd have to wait for a couple weeks. But we have Margaretha, I hope I pronounced that right, from Sweden, and Ed and Gerald, and and Artu from Finland. And if anyone is new here for one of our tying sessions, welcome. We do this most Mondays, and we have a lot of fun. And I try to give you a pattern that maybe will use a little different material or show you a different technique. We could tie tactical nymphs or Euro style nymphs once a week, and just change the rib color, and it would be a different pattern. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a little sick of seeing fast motion beadhead jig flies on Instagram because everybody seems to invent their own pattern when they change the thread color. But I am going to tie a Euro style Jig Nymph today, because I know there's a lot of Julia's feeling fine, Mark. She's not here today. Tanner's here. Julia is actually in another meeting today, but she's doing great and feeling fine. Where was I? Yeah, it's this is a Euro style nymph, and there's a lot of interest these days in fishing with these Euro style nymphs. And please don't forget and understand that the nymphs that you use for an indicator or the nymphs you use for a Euro rig are interchangeable. They're just nymphs. And sometimes I tie my nymphs on a jig hook, and sometimes I don't, and I use them both places. I use jig nymphs under an indicator, and I use non-jig nymphs when I Euro nymph, and I use things like stonefly, pass rubber legs on Euro nymphing that don't even really aren't really a Euro nymph style. So these are all interchangeable. You can use these any place you fish nymphs. You can use these. So, but this is a competition style fly, and I did a little research on it. It's a fly in the Orvis line and in Fulling Mills line, and I couldn't find out who developed the fly. It's kind of a generic traditional fly that is or was used quite a bit on the competition circuit, and so we know it's successful. People that are trying to catch as many trout as they can in a limited amount of time are not going to use a fly that's not terribly reliable. And this thing looks like a Christmas fly, so I probably should have saved it till December. It actually has Christmas colors in it, and it's bright. This is a brighter fly than I would normally fish. I mean, it's got a big bright silver bead, and it's got a red tag on it, and a green hot spot, and a black body. So this thing is super bright, and I don't normally like to fish really bright nymphs, but I looked in my box and I noticed that I didn't have many bright nymphs. And there are times when these bright nymphs that look apparently like nothing in nature will be really successful. I mean, you know, flies like this one and the one we're going to tie next week, the Rainbow Warrior, and they'll often work in you know, clear water and places where you wouldn't think a really bright, almost obnoxious nymph would work. But there's something about the color combinations that appeal to trout. This thing certainly does not look like any aquatic insect I've ever seen, but apparently it's insecty looking enough, and it's the colors are attractive enough to the trout that it works. So it's actually a full disclosure, I've never fished this fly, but as I said, I need some bright flies in my box, so I've tied some of these up, and I'm sure they're gonna work. It's really gonna work well. So anyway, we should probably start. And Ed, thanks for asking. Tim won the live tie-off on the first day with an absolutely perfect parachute Adams. I mean, I actually voted for Tim myself. And then the second day we tied a nymph, Holy Grail, and they tell me I won, but I think it was really a sympathy vote because actually Tim's fly looked better than mine, but they told me I won, so it was a draw. Anyways, we had a lot of fun, and I apologize for the puppy in the background, but my wife and son are gone, and I'm here alone with the puppy, and I thought I took him out in time, but I guess I didn't. So you're probably going to hear him yelling for a while. Oh, I apologize for that. All right, let's start tying, unless there are any other questions at this point. No. All right. So I'm going to go to this camera, and I am going to start with a size 14 tactical jig hook. It's a barbless hook with a bend in it. It's a jig hook so that we can put a bead on there, and it'll hopefully ride a little bit more upside down and be less likely to snag. And then I'm going to take a silver tungsten bead, 7/64 inch tungsten bead, and I'm going to lost my bead. I am going to put the point through the small hole, not the slotted hole, but the small hole. And I'm going to roll it around until I find that hole. A little bit tough in front of the camera here. There it is. And I'm going to put the point in there and then slide it on the hook and just rotate it a little bit till it gets where I want it. And then we'll put it in the vise. And then you want this this bead to kind of ride up like so. Is that on autofocus? That's terrible. I don't want it on auto. I don't know why that was focusing, because it shouldn't be. We want it to ride up like that so that the weight of the bead is above the center line of the hook, because it's going to be below the center line, and then the fly will ride upside down. So to start this, I'm going to use black thread, 8/0 black thread, because the body's black in this. And I'm going to just start my thread here. And I'm going to keep winding and pushing that bead up until the bead stops wiggling. So I'm going to put thread right up against there. And now the bead stopped wiggling and it's in place. So that's all you need to do. And when you look at this, if the bead is placed right, you'll see that Boy, I don't know why that's autofocusing. I'm going to fix this here. It shouldn't not be autofocusing. So bear with me here. Okay. I used this camera this weekend down in New Jersey, so a switch may have gotten flipped. There we go. All right, that should stay in focus. So I got the bead there. Step one, and then I'm going to take. I knew I forgot something. I'm going to take a Coq de Leon feather. Coq de Leon is a stiff fibered, very nicely speckled feather from a specific kind of rooster. And for this fly, I like one that's really darkly speckled, like this one here. Probably, hopefully you can see that speckling in there. And I'm going to, first I'll strip off the bottom, get that stuff out of the way. I'm going to take about, I don't know, half a dozen fibers from the feather, pull down half a dozen or so. Maybe I'll take a few more so you can see it better, and just pluck them from the feather. Actually, a little light there. And I like these tails a little bit less than a shank length. So I'm just going to line up to where I want the tails to be and then hold it there and just capture that feather and pull it a little bit toward me and lift up a little bit and go all the way to the bend. And then that tail will sit nicely right on top of the hook shank. And then you come in and snip the butt ends. Get them out of the way. Now, you may have noticed that this pattern calls for a iridescent, pearlescent, what do we call it on the tinsel is, oh, Tanner, we need to put the pattern up there. I don't see it up there. And I see a question about substitutes for Coq de Leon. You could use grizzly. You could use grizzly hackle fibers, or you could use partridge. Although the reason people use Coq de Leon is it's a lot more durable. This feather is a lot more durable than partridge. But if you want that speckled, you could use wood duck. You could use mallard. But again, they're not going to be as durable. You'll get the same effect. They're just not going to be as durable. So what? Pearlescent red. Yeah, I don't have any pearlescent red tinsel. I couldn't find any. I thought I had some, and I couldn't find any. I didn't have time to go to the Orvis store. So I'm going to use kind of a bright red ultra wire instead. So I'm having, you make substitutes all the time. I make substitutes. I think I'm going to get the same effect. This is a size brassy. It's usually labeled BR on the spool. It's a little bit heavier diameter. And then I'm going to lay that. You can actually stick that wire inside the bead, and you do want to bind this down all the way down the
Hey Tom, can you switch back to the fly?
Oh yeah, sorry. I just stuck that wire up inside the bead. You do want to bind this all the way down the shank, because when you take that first turn of wire, if it's not fully secured, it's going to kind of rotate around the fly. So just bind it down securely. And then you want to come back with your thread to the point where you want your little tag to stop. And I think about there is a good place. You just want a little bit of a color in there, a little bit of a flash. So this fly actually has two hot spots. It has a bright hot spot up front, and it has a bright red hot spot in the back. So, it's a real attractor. And then you're going to carefully take your first turn of wire, and then, did I get it over I can't even see it. Yeah. Take your first turn of wire, and then take your second turn right up against that, kind of push it back against the preceding turn. And about 3 or 4 turns is fine here. You just want a little red hot spot. And then good thing I'm not tying against flagler. I didn't secure that hook in the vise. Maybe 3 turns to tie it off. And then I'm going to helicopter this. I don't always, but I'm going to helicopter this off. Helicoptering is just rotating that wire until it breaks. So I'm going to push that back together a little bit. I see those turns aren't that tightly spaced, and I can't see it. I can't see it myself when I'm looking at the fly here, but I can see it in the camera. That's good enough. Good enough. And then I'm going to take a smaller diameter wire. This is silver ultra wire. Same stuff, but this is a silver and it's size small. This is going to be my rib for the fly. Break a piece of that off. And I'm going to take a turn or two, and if that wire isn't exactly where you want it, just pull it a little bit. And I'm going to bind that down all the way up to there, to the front. And then the body of this is made from a goose feather, a goose shoulder feather, body feather. And you probably don't have black goose body feathers laying around, but that's what the pattern calls for. You could substitute black pheasant tail. You could substitute a crow feather if you have any, or black, if you got any black turkey body feathers, any black soft feather that has long fibers are going to work for this. And I'm going to snip off, about a hook gap, maybe a little bit bigger, of these turkey body or turkey shoulder. What is this? Goose shoulder feathers. And then just cut the ends to even them off, like so. And then lay this in right up against the bead and bind it down all the way back to the red, like so. And then I'm going to just wind this for my body, and I'm going to push it up against the thread. The thread will keep that body feather from separating and going haywire on me. I don't really like the way that body looks. I'm going to start over. For some reason, I don't like the way that looks. Well, let's try it again. That looks a little better. You may even need to grab this stuff with hackle pliers if it's not long enough. I'm just barely going to get there with my fat fingers. And bind that down with a couple turns. And then take your silver wire and rib it through the body. It adds a little flash, and it also reinforces that body. Just evenly spaced turns, 4 or 5 turns. Take a couple turns over the top, helicopter that off. And now you're going to put a CDC hackle on here. And you might think it's crazy that, we like CDC because it floats really well, but CDC has properties that are just as important or more important than flotation. And that is that these fibers are so wispy that they breathe in the current. And you can, if you blow on them, you can see that all those fibers move. So every little movement of the current is going to make those things look alive. And you want to find one that's kind of uniform, and the length doesn't matter on this at this point. And you're going to take that feather by the tip and going to hold it and stroke the fibers back. Be careful, be gentle on this because you don't want to pull those fibers off. And then take your scissors and cut it a little shorter, and then come in and cut the fibers off there, so you're left with this little fuzzy nub there. That's what you're going to tie in. And when I bring it back to the bigger camera, you can see what that looks like. So there's that little fuzzy nib that I'm going to tie in. That's the tip of the feather. And the reason you want to tie it in by the tip is that it'll fold backwards better if you tie it in by the tip. And then this feather, it really helps to use a pair of hackle pliers because they're just so short. It's really tough to get your fingers around the CDC feather. So I'm going to use a pair of hackle pliers here. And you want to stroke this back so that all the fibers are streaming backward. And then, if I don't get in the way of the camera here, just take about maybe 3 turns with this feather. You don't want to overdo this CDC hackle. Just want a little impression of some legs moving up there. And it's going to look terrible at this point. It's going to look really nasty at this point. But we can fix that. I like to take a couple turns just to secure it and then trim it off. And then stroke the fibers back and wind back just barely over those fibers to kind of set them in place so that they all kind of stream back. Now this hackle looks too long to me. Looks pretty messy and it looks too long. But the nice thing about CDC is you just pinch it with your fingernail and pull on it, and you can trim it back shorter. And then I'll usually do this after I take the fly out of the vise where I can see the whole fly. But you can just pluck those. Just carefully grab it with your fingernail and pull on it. It'll break. And it'll still give you kind of a natural looking end. But it won't look like it's trimmed with a pair of scissors. So it'll look a little bit more natural. I'll get the rest of those when I finish. And then finally, a little hot spot. And again, I'm making a substitute. The pattern called for kind of a Kelly green, kind of a dark green ice dubbing. I didn't have any. So I'm going to use this lighter caddis green. It's probably, actually, even if I had the other green, I might use this green because it's a little more caddisy looking, this lighter green than that other stuff. And you don't need much. Just take a little bit of your ice dubbing. And you're going to want a little lump up there, but rather than tying in a fairly heavy lump, what I like to do, I'll show it to you there. What I like to do is to make a narrower diameter rope with this dubbing, but longer. And I think it's more durable because I've noticed when I just make a big lump of dubbing in the front of these flies for a hot spot, it falls apart. So I'm going to dub this really tightly. Let me back up and show you how that's going to look so you can't really see it there.
Tom, we got a few questions.
Okay, so you can see that rope that I've made there is quite thin.
Hey, Tom.
Yeah.
We got a few questions. What brand of scissors are you using?
I got a few answers.
What brand of scissors are you using?
It's top secret.
Top secret. Sorry,
Yeah,
Judge.
No. I am using DOVO. And I don't even know that company, but they're made in Solingen in Germany. And all the greatest, best scissors in the world are made in Solingen. So, if you're looking for a really, really good pair of scissors, and you may not even find them in a fly shop, they're going to cost you $50 to $100, I think, but they're well worth it. The German, Italian, Polish scissors they really make spectacular pairs of scissors for fly tying. And you don't see them that much in shops. You see mostly scissors made in India and Pakistan. And, they're okay. They're pretty good. But, if you're really serious about fly tying, get yourself a pair of German scissors.
And Craig wants to know what's the best fly for a beginner to start tying with, or maybe the best couple flies to start tying with.
San Juan worm, woolly bugger, and hare's ear nymph. How's that? All right. So now I'm going to wind this thing, and I'm going to really wind it tightly. I'm going to really cram that in there so that it isn't terribly bulky, but it's really tight, and it's going to be more durable. And then when you whip finish this, just put a lot of pressure on your whip finish so that the thread gets buried in that dubbing. And I'm really pushing down on that whip finish tool. I'm really putting a lot of pressure on it so that the thread gets sunken down inside that dubbing. And then I'll usually take the fly out of the vise and I'll just look at it and I'll tweak some of those longer fibers. You want the fibers to be about to the end of the hook. Let me tweak some more of these and I'll put it back in. There. I think that's about how long you want your leg fibers to be. So that is it. What is that thing hanging over there that I see? Must be a fiber. I see something hanging there and I can't tell what it is. Dubbing fiber. There we go. Anyway, that is the tactical tungsten head French jig nymph. Do we have any more questions? Let's see. How many flies do you know how to tie? Well, Ed, the list is endless because I usually look up recipes. And if I have the materials, I can usually tie them, unless there's something that's really complicated I've never done before. So, you know, it's endless, really. How would you fish that nymph? Dead drift. Whether you're Euro nymphing and bouncing along the bottom, or whether you're using it with an indicator, or whether you're just fishing it on a floating line to sight fishing, dead drift. Would it be pointless to fish a jig nymph like this in a lake? No, I don't think so, Dan. I don't think so. Again, these nymphs are interchangeable. Wherever you'd fish any kind of nymph, you could fish a jig nymph or a Euro style nymph. You know, they're totally interchangeable. Do you moisten ice dub while making noodle? Yeah, I sometimes, Arthur, I sometimes moisten my fingers. I don't put wax on the thread, but I do sometimes moisten my fingers. Dennis, I would recommend the superfine line because it's a little more delicate and it's a little bit better for close-in work. And the textured line is really good for distance. It shoots better, but you're not going to be concerned with a 6 foot or 7.5 foot 3-weight rod about getting distance. So I would go with a superfine line with that. Where do you get your hooks? Kevin, I get them at a place called the Orvises. Up to the Orvises, as they say in Vermont. And maybe we can put the link to the hooks on the website there, Tanner. Yeah. Oh, you did already. One step ahead of me. Okay. Did I miss any questions? Some good questions today. What kind of leader would you use? You know, I use I mean, if I were Euro nymphing, the leader could be anywhere from 20 feet to 30 feet. It'd be a long leader. But for even for indicator fishing or dry dropper fishing with nymphs, I like a longer leader. I like at least a 12-foot leader. It's easier to mend. The fly line doesn't land as close to the fish, so I would recommend but you didn't say what kind of fishing. So there's when you're Euro nymphing, it's a totally different kind of leader. You can either buy them. You can buy Euro nymphing cider leaders, or you can make them yourself. Either way, Orvis sells them, or you can make them from cider material and standard tippet material. And there's lots of information online on how to make a Euro leader. Any other color for the body? Yeah, sure, Roger. You could make it any color you want. It wouldn't be the tactical tungsten head French jig nymph, but I don't think the body color is a magic thing. A lot of these different Euro nymph patterns, people change one thing or one color and they call it a new fly. But I would experiment with colors. Do you ever split your thread and clip the CDC and wrap it? No, Mark, that's too much work for me. Too much work. It takes too long. You know, I used to be a commercial tire when I was a teenager and in college, and any step that really takes so long, I just have trouble doing it. And I know it might look pretty good and it might be a good technique, but I think that wrapping it is fine, and it's just too many extra steps for me to worry about for my own tying anyways. Oh, let's see. Did we miss anything? It looks like we got them all. Was the sound breaking up for anyone other than Jeff? Trying to figure out if it's our connection here or at his end. Sometimes it's going to be at your end and not ours. Yeah, tweezers, good idea. Tweezers are great for cleaning up a fly. John, that's a great idea. Joseph, I don't know, the Coq de Leon, I would like a medium to a dark, but who knows? You know, I don't think it matters that much as long as it's speckled. Sounds good to everyone else. So whoever was had an issue with the sound, it might be your Jeff. It might be the connection at your end or something. Any other questions? We're going to be tying a similar fly next week, Egan's Rainbow Warrior, which is another fairly bright nymph. This one is not a jig nymph. It'll be on a standard hook. But again, you could tie this one on a standard hook, and you could tie the Rainbow Warrior on a jig hook. Doesn't matter. It's whatever you believe in. You know, people think that jig hooks help the fly ride upside down, and they probably do a little bit, although most weighted flies do ride hook point up, regardless of whether they're jig hook or not. But I do think a jig hook does help you from getting caught on the bottom a little bit more than a standard hook. Any other questions? No. Well, luckily that puppy quieted down. I'll have to go take him for a walk. All right, everyone. Well, I want to thank you for tuning in this week. Those are some great questions. Appreciate it. And if you're new, welcome to Fly Tying Monday. And I will be here same time, same place, with a different nymph next week, because it's kind of nymph fishing time of year. Winter time for most of us is going to be mostly nymph fishing. So I thought I'd tie a couple nymphs 2 weeks in a row. So, and plus I need some nymphs in my fly box because you lose a lot more nymphs than you do anything else. So my fly box is looking pretty lame. So my nymph box. So I need to crank out some nymphs, and I'm sure you do as well. So anyway, thanks everyone, and see you next week.